There are delightful walks in that part of Grasmere called Easedale, wrote Wordsworth, and he may be regarded as an authority on the subject. Dorothy's journals are filled with reports of walks to Easedale, sometimes referred to as the Black Quarter because of the clouds and storms that gather there. And William claimed to have written thousands of verses by the side of Easedale Beck. De Quincey also had a special affection for the place. The little valley of Easedale, he wrote, is on its own account one of the most impressive solitudes amongst the mountains of the Lake District. He praises at length its seclusion, its lovely small fields and miniature meadows, its level floor and the sublimity of its mountain barriers. Above the valley are the Sour Milk Gill waterfall, which Dorothy refers to as Churn Milk Force, and Easedale Tarn, both parts of its attractiveness to De Quincey. In one of its many rocky recesses is seen a force, such is the local name for a cataract, white with foam, descending at all seasons with respectable strength, and after the melting of snows with an alpine violence. Follow the leading of this force for 3/4 of a mile, and you come to a little mountain lake, locally termed a tarn, the very finest and most gloomily sublime of its class. One spot became particularly dear to Wordsworth. He named it his other home, my dwelling and my out-of-doors abode. When Wordsworth was 30 years old, and he'd only been living in Grasmere a year, he wrote a poem about this place, this beck, which he dedicated to his sister Dorothy. It was an April morning, fresh and clear the rivulet, delighting in its strength, ran with a young man's speed. And yet the voice of waters which the winter had supplied was softened down into a vernal tone. The spirit of enjoyment and desire, and hopes and wishes from all living things went circling like a multitude of sounds. A calamity which the Wordsworth were much concerned about happened in March 1808 to the little family that lived in the cottage at Blindtarn Gill, a cottage which is still standing now. George and Sarah Green, whose graves are in the Grasmere churchyard, lived in a cottage with 6 children, the oldest 11 years old and the youngest an infant. They were the poorest people in the vale, with a small estate heavily mortgaged, one nearly dry cow, and few possessions. But they were cheerful and well liked, and the children were, in Wordsworth's words, the admiration of everybody for their innocence, affectionate dispositions, and good behaviour. In March, George and Sarah Green went over the fell into Langdale to a farm sale. It was for them a social occasion rather than a commercial one, and on their way home they became lost in a snowstorm, fell on the crags, and perished. William was in London at the time of this tragedy, but all the men in Grasmere stopped their work to look for the bodies until they were found, and the women took care of the 6 children. Mary Wordsworth and others formed a committee to place the children with local families, and the Wordsworths themselves took in one daughter, Sally. William wrote a poem about the tragedy and wrote letters to his more rich and powerful friends, and they raised money to clothe the orphans and send them to school. This is Sour Milk Gill waterfall, which Dorothy referred to as Churn Milk Force. Here is Easedale Tarn, the one which De Quincey called possibly the finest and most gloomily sublime of all tarns. And here also, some years afterwards, Dorothy and William were returning from Langdale and they parted company. And Dorothy, coming back on her own, went into fog. And she got so confused, she sat down, and just as well she did, because when the fog cleared, she was right at the edge of the precipice and nearly had fallen into this very tarn.